Welcome back to the Weekend Prime Time. We are back with the breaking news that our colleague Rachel Maddow earlier called the end of an era. That's the sad passing of Robert Mueller, the former FBI director and the special counsel who led the blockbuster investigation into Russian interference in the first election of Donald Trump. Mueller was 81 years old. His cause of death has not yet been announced, but two people familiar with the case tell MS Now that he had been suffering from Parkinson's disease for years. Mueller's high-stakes investigation launched his profile to stratospheric levels and made him a key target of Trump, who regularly blasted Mueller's investigation as a witch hunt. Those attacks took an especially ugly turn today when Trump reacted to the news of Mueller's death by posting that he is, quote, glad he's dead. During our conversation with Rachel Maddow about Mueller's long legacy, she called him the last in a line of people we likely won't see the likes of again. But she also argued that ultimately his investigation was a failure. Listen.
There's a reason on a day like this we need to remind people what was in Mueller's report, what were the results of his investigation. And that's because of a failure on his part. That is because once his investigation and his report were concluded, he was just wildly outmaneuvered by a really serpentine attorney general named Bill Barr, who played really dirty pool when it came to the handling and release of the information from Mueller's investigation.
Joining us now to discuss is Ty Cobb, former White House attorney during the first Trump administration. Ty, thank you so much for joining us. You were the White House's point person during the Mueller investigation. What do you make of that argument we just heard from our colleague Rachel, that it was ultimately a failure?
Well, please let me preface my remarks by saying my condolences go out to Bob's family and his friends. He was an American hero, in my view, and a man whose character and courage and sense of duty stands out to me as among the most admirable I've ever seen. I don't think what Rachel said is remotely accurate. I think while that there is a narrative along those lines, people need to remember that Bob had some very serious legal responsibilities. Bill Barr had some very serious legal responsibilities. Each did the best they could. They were longtime friends, very close friends, and they maneuvered it well. And the brief rift that occurred over the clash of their responsibilities diminished greatly over time. So I think she's very much wrong as a legal matter and as a factual matter. I know every fact in the report. And I think that, unfortunately, unlike what we've seen in terms of the past 8 years of corruption and consequential authoritarianism and now fascism practiced by the president, that was a matter in which what he was accused of originated with the now widely discredited Steele dossier, which arose under interesting circumstances involving money from a political campaign. And he reached the right conclusion that the president couldn't be prosecuted. Certainly he did his best to develop the information and the evidence, but he didn't have the job of trying to prosecute Trump. He had the job of trying to develop the facts, and the facts did not get that particular case to a finish line that allowed for Trump's prosecution. And I think he did his job. He did it well, just like he did everything else in his life. He was somebody who, from youth on, excelled at everything he ever did and pursued it with character and integrity. So I don't believe that what Rachel Maddow said is remotely accurate.
So, Ty, are you taking umbrage with her assertion that there was a there, that the public, that it got muddled because of Barr coming out really quickly and setting the narrative? Or are you taking factual, do you think that something else was wrong? Because where do you stand on the Mueller conclusion that Russia did intervene to help Trump in the election? Yes or no?
So the evidence that came forward with regard to that was minimal. It involved some bots. As we now know, the CIA had reported to the White House that the Clinton campaign had initiated a false flag Russian operation. That complicated Bob's ability to do what many would have hoped he could have done, which was to pursue the president. But that wasn't his job. His job was to develop the facts and determine whether pursuit was appropriate, and he concluded it could not be done legally, and he was right. So I don't think he can be condemned for failing to take down the president in a case where the evidence just wasn't there, unlike what we see now in terms of him having enriched himself to the tune of $4 billion over the past year and having deprived Americans of their freedoms and spreading fascism. So I think, sadly, that didn't result in a takedown, but that was not Bob's fault, and it wasn't his job.
Ty, can I go back to 2018 when you left the White House? You
Sure.
did not criticize. You did not agree with the criticism at the time of people like Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump, who went after Bob Mueller in this investigation, calling it a witch hunt. People have characterized your participation as somebody who believed in transparency, and that the sooner you participated with Bob Mueller's investigation, the sooner this would conclude. That's obviously a different track than what Trump and Giuliani did once you left that. I'm curious, what was the breaking point for you? I mean, you're using very strong words now to describe the president and how he has conducted himself over the last couple of years. And I'm wondering, what was the breaking point for you that made you come to that conclusion?
So I think I'm using very accurate words. They may be strong, but they're factually based. Right. And at the time, frankly, the transparency that I had urged was complete. We had produced every document in a professional, collegial way. We didn't have any legal disputes. There were no subpoenas. There were no court proceedings of the type that have stressed the Constitution recently. I didn't permit that, and Bob didn't either. We collaborated along with his staff to get the information to them that they needed, and all the White House interviews were voluntary. So all that had been largely concluded, with a couple of exceptions at the time I departed. I did depart in large part because of the fact that my work was largely done, and also that the president and Rudy were taking a much sharper tone, and that was one that I had cautioned against when I first took the job and was not comfortable with at the end.
I want to ask you to go back a bit over just his life and legacy. You described him in kind of moving terms at the beginning when you first reflected on him. And in the past, you've also praised his military service in Vietnam. We touched on that earlier in our show. And I'm just curious if you can talk a bit about the things that made Mueller, the parts of his life and career that maybe Americans aren't as familiar with, if all they understand is the 2016 Russia probe. What are the other sides of his story that you think the American public should know?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to, I think, being misunderstood in terms of, the success or lack of success of that investigation, the reality is he succeeded greatly in that investigation. He went through it professionally, and he did a characteristically brilliant job of pursuing it with a great sense of duty and with the integrity and with the dignity that it required. That is Bob Mueller to a T. From the time he was a young man, he was an intense competitor, a phenomenal athlete, and both in prep school and in college, and somebody who, with determination and skill and a remarkable sense of what was appropriate, what was the best of qualities to pursue and exemplify. This is a man who went to Vietnam because one of his college teammates had been shot in Vietnam and killed. That motivated him to join the Marines. He was a infantryman. He carried a wounded colleague hundreds of yards through through a open field during live fire in a battle where half his platoon was killed. He later took a bullet to the leg in a separate firefight. This was somebody who, who then served at the Justice Department throughout the country, in California, in Boston, and elsewhere. And it made justice, for the country. He didn't do it for himself. I mean, he could have made millions of dollars in private practice. He actually didn't enjoy his first endeavor into private practice. He and I would often have lunch together when we were in D.C. working at different firms, and he couldn't wait to get back to the Justice Department. He went back and tried murder cases, and then it was later promoted to a more senior level. So this is a great man. This is somebody who I think we should be focused on him tonight, not on Trump, and recognize that as a hero, he can inspire us into No King's Day.
Ty Cobb, thank you for your memories of Director Robert Mueller. That was really eloquent.
Thank you.